Hey everyone, happy Wednesday. Today we are going to talk about what your joints and your brain are trying to tell you in midlife. So, hey there, friends. Welcome back to the Healthy Living Happy Life podcast. I'm your host, Denise Siegel, the Menopause Mentor, your go to guide for flipping the switch on fatigue, frustration, energy, clarity, joy, and all things menopause. So, today I am going to dig into two things in particular, two, let's call them mysteries, that are anything but minor, though we don't always put a lot of emphasis on them. We complain about them, but then we don't really do enough about fixing these issues. The two things I want to talk about today, joint pain and brain fog, which, believe it or not, are coming from the same thing. So, if you've been waking up feeling kind of stiff and achy for no real reasons, just as kind of something new, if you feel like your brain, your thoughts are kind of like wading through molasses, or more likely here for me, paragraphs, um, or if you started to believe that feeling this way is just part of aging, stay tuned because that is something we're going to stop saying. Today, we're going to connect the dots between inflammation, menopause, estrogen, and these symptoms that most of us feel, but most of us feel, but few understand. So what's really happening inside, right? And we always kind of think, well, it's my joints, I have achiness, it's just one specific thing, but there's so much more going on. So what exactly is inflammation? Inflammation is your immune system's built-in defense mechanism, basically, right? Think of it, when you fall and you scrape your knee, you get acute inflammation, which helps you to heal a cut or a bruise. It's essentially, it's healing. Your body needs to heal, and that's how your immune system does that, by acute inflammation. Inflammation that basically, once it's healed, it goes away. When inflammation sticks around for longer than, say, the threat, until like long after the threat is gone, right? If you have a bigger cut, it takes a little bit longer, right? If you've been in a car accident or had a surgery, it takes a little bit longer for inflammation to go away. But at some point when you're healed, inflammation should just stop, right? But what's happening is this inflammation that kind of continues, this low grade chronic inflammation, is really like, if you think of it this way, it's like silent background noise. It's not quite silent, but there's some background noise back there. You're not really listening to it, but it's actually interrupting, right? You can sort of hear it when it's actual noise. You can hear it, but typically it's not a big deal. When it comes in your body, there's this quiet noise that's disrupting everything, especially during and after menopause. It's a big deal. Why? What's the big thing when I talk about with menopause? Estrogen. Most people still think that estrogen is exclusively associated with reproduction. However, estrogen is actually a hormone for full body wellness. It's kind of like, in a way, it's kind of like your hormones CEO, right? It does so many incredible things. It has over 400 different tasks in your body. So think about that. It regulates dozens of systems, including your brain, your joints, your bones, your immune response, and of course, your metabolism, right? So when estrogen declines, inflammation starts to increase, right? And two noticeable places, obviously your joints and your brain, because those are the two things we're talking about. So with this decrease of estrogen, increase of inflammation, all of a sudden you kind of get into this cycle, because estrogen, if you don't help estrogen levels even out or bring them back to a comfortable level, the inflammation is just going to continue to increase, because without any intervention, your estrogen is just going to continue to decrease, right? So first thing I want to talk about is, or the first piece I'll talk about is why your joints feel suddenly so achy, and the role that estrogen actually plays. So let's talk about those joints. Yep, they're a little bit more stiff. You get stiffness in your hands and your hips. maybe your knees. Even if you haven't changed like your workout routine, your sleeping, whatever it is, something is different, right? And no, you're not imagining it. Something really is happening. But what most of us don't know, and this isn't, it's funny, it's not something anybody talks about very much. Even when you go to the doctor and have conversations with your doctor, whichever doctor you're going to, an OBGYN, primary care doctor, whomever, whichever type of doctor, they really don't talk about estrogen, and really kind of avoid the whole conversation about women's hormones, right? Even though women's hormones do so many things beneficial for us. So estrogen is one of your body's most powerful natural anti-inflammatories, right? It's obviously not just reproductive. It's kind of like your multitasking hero, right? It does so many things. Like I said, it has like over 400 tasks in your body. So when it's flowing, when we're younger and estrogen levels are where they need to be, right? Obviously, you have reduced inflammation. I mean, there is no inflammation unless it's acute inflammation because you have estrogen keeping it in check, right? And so reduce inflammation in your joint tissues by calming down. What it does, it calms down cytokines, which are kind of called, I think of them as like pro-inflammatory messengers that spark pain. Okay, I'll get into a little bit more of this in a minute. Um, Estrogen helps preserve the cartilage between your joints. Right, we know there's cartilage there. It's between your joints. It's between your spine. Right, keeps everything cushioned, smooth, and shock absorbent. Right, people always say to me because I'm a runner, "Oh, doesn't it kill your knees?" Well, doesn't really, because I pay attention to my estrogen. Yes, I am on estrogen support. I'm on bioidentical hormones, and I have been for 3 years, and I will never change because of all the benefits that I feel. I know when I started taking it, I felt like crap. And that's why I talk about this, because nobody explained this to me. I do a lot of this research on my own. The information, the science is out there. The information is there. It's just not getting, somehow it's not getting to our doctors, which means it's not getting to us in those regular conversations. Estrogen also improves circulation, which of course, if you have good circulation, is going to keep your joints nourished and healthy, right? Everything is flowing the way it's supposed to. Also modulates pain signals, right? Making your body actually more resilient and less reactive to everyday wear and tear. Right? We're doing our 10,000 steps, right? Or if we're, running 20 miles a week or on the elliptical or doing yoga, whatever we're doing, right? We are creating some wear and tear. And that's actually when you're working out and exercises, there's always going to be some wear and tear. I mean, just walking around for 54 years, you get some wear and tear, right? Um, During perimenopause, years leading up to menopause, and menopause, as your estrogen levels drop so significantly, right? And when you're perimenopause, you may not really notice it. Some women, it drops really quickly. This was my challenge. I started noticing this when I was 37. I was like, "Ooh, what the heck is going on here?" Right? Most women don't that I have talked to really don't start to notice these things until they're in their 40s. And by the time they're 50, they're going, "What the heck is going on?" Right? Again, estrogen affects so many things in our body, so many systems in our body. And the fact that we don't talk about estrogen enough, these hormones enough, to understand what they really do. So without enough estrogen, your joints are losing this protective, like oil, we'll call it, like this protective protection. What happens then? Of course, inflammation sets in, right? Think of it this way: it's like trying to open like a rusty knob or a rusty hinge, right? It's tight, it's squeaky, doesn't really give, right? And when it's your knee that's tight and kind of creaky, it's really uncomfortable. So what happens is, more often than not, people go, "Oh, my knees hurt, so I can't run. Oh, my knees hurt, my hips hurt, so I can't do this form of exercise. I can't do yoga. I can't do blah blah blah." Which actually is the opposite of what we should be doing. When we start to feel this discomfort, we actually need to be doing more to make ourselves feel better. I was talking to a friend of mine just earlier today, and she was saying that someone she knows who has rheumatoid arthritis tends to not exercise or move, or she has all these reasons why she can't. However, when they were on vacation and they were doing a lot of walking, they were doing a lot of tours, and she said to my friend that she said at the end of it, I haven't felt this good in years. Like my knees feel good. I feel like I can move, because she stopped trying, because she thought, when things are uncomfortable, you just stop. And so I'm just telling you now that if things are starting to get uncomfortable, we need to really look at the inflammation, and we need to understand that it's not just aging, right? Aging and menopause obviously goes together. You're not having menopause when you're 20, right? You have menopause, perimenopause into menopause when you're in your later 40s or early 50s. So obviously they kind of go together. And there's certain things that you could say, oh, maybe it's a little aging, my skin isn't as tight, whatever. But when it comes to these other things, it's not just aging. There is actually a physiological shift that's going on inside your body. Um, it can be managed, it can be supported, and a lot of it even reversed. When you know actually what your body is asking for, what your body is doing, and figuring out what it needs, right? That's one of the things I can help you with. So let's kind of shift gears here for a few minutes and talk about brain fog, right? We call it brain fog. Who came up with the phrase brain fog? Um, I guess it makes sense, but I don't feel like I've never felt like I was foggy. I always kind of felt when I did struggle with this, it was more like I felt like I hadn't slept, and I was tired. But brain fog is kind of a funny word, but truly, that's what we call it. So that's what I'm going to call it today, brain fog. Okay, it's not in your head. Well, it is in your head, but it's not that you're not imagining it, right? Brain fog, of course, it's in your head. But seriously, you're not imagining it. There is something going on, right? So if you've been struggling with relapses, finding words, remember somebody's names, right? Um, and you feel like you're kind of in this mental cloud that doesn't quite lift, you're always kind of in some kind of dazed and confused, so to speak. You're absolutely not alone. It's one of the top complaints that menopausal women struggle with. And again, it's not just aging, it's not just stress. Yeah, of course, pieces of that can contribute, but this is actually something called neuroinflammation. Neuro being brain, inflammation being swelling, inflammation. So it's basically inflammation that is affecting your brain, hence the term neuroinflammation. So, you basically think of it this way. So your brain actually has its own immune system. It's led by something called microglia. Oh my God, I've only said this word a million times now, I can't say it. Which is primarily it's the primary immune system for your central nervous system. Okay, think of it this way: it's like your brain's housekeeper, so to speak. Their job is to clean off, damaged cells, dust them off, prune neural connections. And we know our brain is always making these synapses and these connections, right? But at some point we need to, get rid of them, and that's actually part of what happens when we're sleeping, right? And basically it's this um, microglia that is actually keeping things in your brain running smoothly, right? So when your body is inflamed, especially your body's inflamed, your estrogen levels have dropped during menopause, they basically stop cleaning, doing their housekeeping job. They actually start attacking us, right? They kind of go into panic mode, right? There's not enough of this estrogen to kind of keep them working properly. So they kind of kind of go haywire, let's say. And they begin releasing inflammatory molecules, two in particular that I'm going to talk about, TNF alpha and interleukin 6, or it's also called IL-6, which is really funny because my husband, with his research group, are always talking about IL-6 or IL-9 inflammation. He's an immunologist. So this makes so much sense to me. And I just want to try to bring this down to a level that we can all understand. So we all really can figure out what's going on in our body and know what's happening rather than going, I don't know, I just don't feel good, right? So TNF alpha is also it's called tumor necrosis factor. I guess there's a beta too, who knows? But TNF alpha is a chemical messenger that your immune system uses to basically amplify inflammation, right? It's helpful in fighting infection, but when it's in your brain, too much of it interferes with your how your neurons actually communicate with each other. It kind of messes with your memory, messes with your focus, and messes with your mood. Hello, brain fog, right? So IL-6 is the other, actually called cytokines or inflammatory signal that rises during stress, infection, and you guessed it, menopause. Gee, aren't we lucky, ladies? Everything like menopause just does all sorts of wonderful things to us. If we understand what's going on, we can understand how to manage it. So a rise in IL-6 is partially attributed to decline in estrogen level, right? Because get this, estrogen normally has a suppressive regulatory on IL-6 production, like it did with the TNF alpha. So when estrogen is in check, everything works well. Like if you think of it, estrogen is kind of like the cool-headed boss that keeps IL-6 in check, except when it's no longer there, right? So both of these inflammatory signals, TNF alpha and IL-6, are inflammatory messengers that basically are amplified after or during menopause because they need estrogen to keep them in check. So when estrogen levels drop, your IL-6 rises, and that's actually not just a brain issue. I started talking about it because of brain fog, but it has actually whole body implications. Why? Again, what estrogen does so many things. But studies show that elevated IL-6 levels are linked to both frequency and severity of, guess what? Hot flashes. Freaking hell, really? Okay, great. Bone loss and osteoporosis. IL-6 promotes osteoclast activities. Okay, those are the cells that break down bone. More IL-6, higher levels of IL-6 means faster bone loss, especially in now post-menopausal women, right? Unless you're taking some type of hormonal supplement to bring up your estrogen levels and your progesterone levels. I'm not talking too much about progesterone today, but your estrogen levels, bone loss during postmenopause increases. Now, yes, we can exercise and do strength training to help mitigate that, but it's really important to know that the lack of estrogen, our lack of estrogen is actually accelerating bone loss. So what else? Cardiovascular risk. I knew there was something else I wanted to talk about. IL-6 is involved in the inflammatory cascade that contributes to plaque buildup in your arteries, rising your risk for atherosclerosis and heart disease. Hey, both which spike after menopause. Yep, postmenopausal women, your risk of heart disease, cardiovascular diseases increases. Again, we do know this. These are things that we think of just as aging, as you get older. But understand that estrogen plays a role here. Okay, so really, really important. Estrogen plays a role in increased inflammation. Increased inflammation causes all of these challenges that we're talking about, right? So this is not just brain fog, ladies, right? This is a systemic shift sparked by inflammation, driven by hormonal decline, and you feel it in your mood, your memory, your bones, your joint, and your heart. And probably more things that I'll talk about on another day. So when your body's kind of going, okay, something's going on here, and let's be real, like some days, like our body's not just, whispering, hey, something's going on here. It's going, oh my God, my knees hurt, my joints hurt. What are you doing? Do something about this, right? But what we need to do is we need to respond with tools. right? Just over-the-counter medication to maybe make some of the pain go away. Obviously, we don't want to be in pain, so that is helpful. But over the long term, we want to see what we can do to make the pain go away for good, right? We are looking at the root cause here of the pain, not just making the pain go away. Okay. Let's see. And I think once we know the science, that's kind of the point of knowing the science, we can do something about it, right? Just like your joints, your brain, and your entire system can recover. We think of menopause as kind of like the end of a time. Yeah, sure. You can no longer have children at this stage. When you're postmenopausal, you're never going to have children again. Yep, you can have grandkids. That's great, right? But it's not the end. It's an end of an era, maybe, but it's the beginning of something very new and very different. And it really has only been in the last, so they say 20, but I really think, 5 to 10 years where people have been talking more and more about menopause and how it affects women, um, emotionally, physically, all of the things, right? And it's not just something that we can just sit home and go, oh, well, it's menopause. Oh, I'm old aging. No, if you want to live vitally and you want to live a life that is really worth living, it's your responsibility to take care of your body, understand what's going on, and use the tools that I can help you with. Because once you cool that internal fire, that internal flame, and start speaking to your body and start treating your body in a way um, that maybe you haven't before, right? With real food, with restorative habits, the right kind of support, you can feel better. You can get rid of the brain fog and reverse the joint issues that you're having for the most part, right? Nothing is 100%, right? Again, we're in our 50s, we're not in our 20s. So obviously, here's the hopeful part. Inflammation is reversible. Okay? You don't need to change your whole life, right, to get relief. I'm never going to tell anyone you have to change your whole diet. You have to change your whole lifestyle. There are things that we need to start doing. And over time, you'll be amazed at how many small changes you make just because you started to feel better, right? And if you feel better, you look better, like you start shining and you're happy and you want to do more. And when you feel this, you want to do more of the same, right? So if it's, focusing on your diet, eating clean and whole foods, most of the time, you want to continue to do that, right? So you basically need to start sending your body different signals through food, through movement, through rest, not through restriction. Never, 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 when I talk about diet, am I talking about you going on a diet? That's in menopause. That's a word that should just get rid. You need to just get rid of that phrase, right? You are never going on a diet again. We're going to focus on your nutrition. That is different. So a couple of recommendations here just for the podcast. Get rid of those inflammatory oils and processed foods. Okay, I'm an 80-20 person. If you're eating 50 or 60% of the oils and processed foods, then I think there's room for improvement there, right? They're just fueling your joint pain and your brain fog, right? This is part of the problem, right? Nutrition always, it always starts with nutrition. Processed foods are basically something that your body is seeing as an invader, right? So what does it do? It's same thing when you cut your hand. It sends basically messengers there to attack it. And so that is inflammation. It causes more inflammation. Add more omega-3 fatty acids, walnuts, flaxseed, salmon. Never going to tell you to eat some of the weird fish that a dietitian will, because I won't eat that crap. But seriously, with walnuts, flax seeds, and salmon, I mean, most people like salmon, or you can learn to eat, enjoy a little bit of salmon, right? These help regulate the inflammatory pathways that support your brain and your joints. And of course, I mentioned already, eat real food. Let's focus on whole, colorful foods, especially those that are high in antioxidants, blueberries, and fiber. Lots of veggies, whole grains, all of those things high in fiber. They will help lower that systemic inflammation and support you in ways that your body hasn't had in a long time, especially if you have not been focusing on this. There is we call it the standard American diet, because so many of us in this country eat in this manner. And we've been doing it for so long that we forget that we actually know what whole foods are, what real foods are, and we know what our body needs. We just haven't done it in such a long time that it's something that we need to maybe relearn, right? So whole colorful foods, okay? Make sure you have a good foundation, hydration, restorative sleep, gentle movement to keep those joints lubricated, and your brain oxygenated. Okay. I don't necessarily think everyone has to, do the 10,000 steps a day. I do want people to keep moving. But I'm a runner. So I know 4 days a week, I'm going to go out and I'm going to go for a run. And that usually gives me about 7,000 steps. And the rest of the steps, if I get them around the house, that's great. But I know I've done something else for my body, right? I know I've done something for my brain because I've been outside, out in nature, fresh air, all of that. I'm moving my body. I'm strengthening my muscles. I'm getting my heart health. So movement is really important. Now, obviously, if you have a lot of joint pain right now, you do want to start with something more gentle than running. The elliptical machine at a gym, or gentle yoga, and walking. Walking is a great start. Most people that when I talk about movement, they're not even walking to the mailbox and back. They drive to the mailbox, or drop something off on their way out and pick up the mail on their way home. So gentle movement, and if you can move outside, that's really the best for you, because again, this is helping your brain. So if it does make sense, talk to your doctor, your practitioner, about estrogen support, because I think it really is the missing piece. And again, whether it's through food, because yes, there are foods that can help you to increase your estrogen levels. Soy products are really good and for that, but also herbs. And of course, then there's your traditional or bioidentical hormone therapy. And that's something I may talk about another time, is the differences of the two. And also some of the conversations that clients of mine have had with their doctors that kept them kind of in the dark for a lot longer than they would have wished. So truly, this is about clarity. It's about comfort. And of course, these are things that you can have. The clarity without the brain fog. So if you're struggling with joint pain, brain fog, just don't chalk it up to, this is just age. Your symptoms are not random. They're not, failures. They're not part of getting older. They're actually signals. It's not necessarily that your body is breaking down. Okay. It's asking for a reset. I'm really good at resets. I love resets. And the good news is you don't have to figure it out alone, right? If you're ready to stop guessing and start healing, I'd love to help you with a plan that works with your biology, not against it, and flip the switch on inflammation to put out that fire. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes for you to book your free Midlife Metabolic Flip. That is the name of my 8-week program. It's a continually running program, so there's not, you have to wait till XYZ date till I start it. Nope, it's a continually running program, and there's a reason for that, because when you want help, you want help. So that's why I'm here. So thanks everyone for tuning in to Healthy Living, Happy Life. If this episode spoke to you, please, please, please share it with a friend, because midlife is not the end of health. It's the beginning of deep wisdom, true wellness, and loving the life that you live. So until next time, I'm Denise Stegall, Menopause Mentor. Stay well, stay curious, stay kind to yourself. Healthy living, happy life. Bye.